What is economics? It's the science of decision making. It's studying how people try to satisfy their unlimited and competing wants with the limited and scarce resources that they have, including most people's most scarce resource, or everyone's most scarce resource, their time. Economics can be divided into two main categories. You have microeconomics, which looks at the decisions of individuals, households, and firms in very small and specific markets, whereas macroeconomics studies aggregates, or the whole picture of an economy, such as the gross domestic product, unemployment rate, inflation, price stability, and determining whether or not there is a healthy growth rate. The basic economic problem that persists is scarcity. And this is simply the condition that emerges from the fact that we have not enough resources to satisfy all of the wants that people have. And so, because of this, whenever we make choices, we have opportunity cost. And this is the value of the best alternative that has to be given up when a choice is made. So, when you go to first block class every day, probably your next best alternative would have been sleeping rather than getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning or whenever you get up and going, making sure that you're in class on time. Economists use the term "there's no such thing as a free lunch" to explain that everything in life has a cost. And when I say cost to you, you probably think of cost in terms of a monetary value. But not everything has a cost that is in terms of monetary value, and that's why economists say Tinstoffel. Even when it seems as though we are getting something at no cost to us, there is still a cost that's incurred, and someone somewhere picks up the cost for this concept. Things in life are never free. They may be free to you, but they are never free in general, because someone has to pick up the cost. And so when economists think broadly in terms of opportunity cost, it's the next best selection that people would have made if they hadn't made their choice. So it could have been a different use of money, time, or resources. And when we decide how much more or less to do, you're thinking at the margin. Thinking at the margin is when you're studying for a test. If you study for 15 minutes, you think, maybe I should study a little bit more, I might get a better grade. When you're deciding how much longer you should study, that's thinking at the margin. Evaluating the marginal cost or marginal benefit helps you decide how much longer you should study. So, let's say you've studied for 15 minutes and you think if you study for another, let's say 30 minutes, you could get an entire letter grade higher. So let's say you study for 15 minutes, you'd get a C. You study for 45 minutes, you could get a B. But in order to get that A, you might have to study for another 2 hours. Instead of 45 minutes, you'd have to study 2 hours and 45 minutes to get an A. So the marginal cost of the A would be an extra 2 hours of studying time, but the marginal benefit is that you get an A instead of a B or a C. How high the cost is in regards to the actual benefits going to vary from person to person. So this is a graphic that just shows the concept of scarcity. So scarcity is derived from unlimited wants in society and limited resources. That creates the condition of scarcity, and it forces societies into choices. And the three basic questions, basic economic questions that emerge from societies and people being forced into making choices is: what will be produced, how much will be produced, and for whom will we produce these goods and services in our society? These are the three basic economic questions. And this is how economic systems are structured or created. It's the method by which a society chooses to produce and distribute goods and services. So what will be produced, how will be produced, and for whom will these goods and services be produced?